what do romantic relationships look like for you as Yahyel? Are they monogamous or polyamorous in nature?
All right. What our romantic relationships look like? Thank you. So, in asking whether they are monogamous or polyamorous in nature, both ideas are, you could say, accepted and completely embraced, and each has its own values to offer. Romantic relationships are, for us, a strong mirror reflection, a deepening of getting to know ourselves. Whoever is involved in the relationship, this goes for all of them. We are aware of that quote unquote natural function of any relationship, but specifically in romantic ones. We have been raised to understand that to a very deep degree. And so, when we dive in that way deeper into each other's consciousness, we understand that with the nearness to another, there is an expansion of the self awareness. Because you could say that with the strong love and passion that is felt mutually in that moment and shared in that moment, there is an even higher degree of blending of the energy fields than already commonly is present amongst our entire species. So you could say that through the idea of romantic relationships, the first steps of the potential, eventual, non physical blending of our species is being introduced. For you, romantic relationships are more like a practicing ground or the announcement of an overall much more deeply felt unconditional love that you can share as a collective. And then from that moment on, once the idea of that type of unconditional love, seeing everybody in a sense as an extension of yourself, as a family member in that way, from that moment on, you will understand what we mean by this. Then your love relationships, your romantic relationships, will gain yet another level of depth. Some people on your earth today, however, are already also experiencing, you could say, previews of that idea. The romantic energy, the unconditional love, the passion felt, can then truly feel ascending, as if you are lifted up, out and above of the energy frequency reality that you are occupying. This is also in that way for us the case when we choose to explore ourselves in that way. We can lift each other out and above of the energy frequency wavelength on which our own species is also right now oriented. And if you will, you can perhaps imagine a sheet of silk fabric laying flat on the ground, and then on certain parts of the sheet, people picking it up with their fingers and starting to pull it higher, so that there will be little tents here and there, tiny little tents, little points where the sheet is being pulled up. This pulling up is done through the love relationships. They can be romantic, but it can also be an intensely felt friendship. It can also be one person offering assistance to another in a mutually shared excitement for a certain invention. For instance, there are so many ways wherein that fabric can be lifted just slightly higher in vibrational reality, that if just enough individuals in a collective start doing that, the entire sheet eventually will hover above the ground and the points will rise even higher and so forth. And this is how, through a metaphor, we can explain the idea of ascension for a collective, in a sense, takes place.
Oh, wow.
Well, thank
Uh,
you.
uh, do you as Yahyel make love the way we as humans do?
We do, but then, yet again, it is experienced in a wholly different way. You could say that. Let us see how we translate this. Since we are already telepathically connected, there's a whole lot less guesswork going on, first of all. If you could eliminate all the guesswork from your relationships, they would look entirely different. Now, if you would take that into love relationships, even those, even though we understand for many of you, there's there's a much higher level of telepathy often already present there between those of you that have a healthy and intense and close connection together in a love relationship in that way. Even then, there would still be quite a big difference. Then, on top of that, our bodies are, compared to yours, heightened in sensitivity, you could say. We are extremely sensitive if you would compare it to yourselves. We can see very sharply, we smell to a much stronger degree, we are much more sensitive when it comes to smells. The same is true for touch and taste and flavors. This is why we do not need a very extended menu. Connecting this to the earlier question about diet, as you asked, we do not need a very extended menu in order to have a very rich and very full experience of many, many flavors. This is why the one that we compared to spinach but looks more like a clover is such a popular leaf, because in and on itself it contains so many nutritional aspects, minerals, vitamins, things that we benefit from organically, but also just the one leaf tickles the entire taste spectrum, you could say, for us. So, in love making, you may perhaps begin to get an idea of how that might be different. Let's just put it this way. For us, less is more, with a big wink. It doesn't mean we don't do what you do necessarily, we just do it in a wholly different way. It still does involve, though, the type of what you call, perhaps, we're looking in the dictionary of the channel, insemination, the
Yes.
same natural fertilization in that way still takes place. It is just that the experience of all of that can be as if together, now in this example, speaking for a couple, it can be experienced as if going into a deeply meditative state and having a moment of, in a sense, speaking to God and overseeing the entire species that we are, and understanding that we are cross connecting with a soul or multiple volunteering souls that are eager to incarnate in our species. We are in communication with those in that point still non physical entities that are eager to play in the dance of insemination in that way. The broad spectrum awareness of so many aspects multidimensionally and energetically, that come in and that flow through anyone who is in the act of true love making, is quite a bit more richly experienced than for most of you. Intimacy, too, in that sense, can be much more subtle and still be experienced as grotesque. Think of yourself when you were perhaps for the very first time extremely in love with someone, and them just looking at you and shivers down your spine. Perhaps that gives an idea.
All right. Do you also mean that you are aware what happens during conception on a soul level?
Yes,
All
the
right.
soul is part of the dance itself. When we know a entity is curious to have us as a parent, in the example again of just two people making love in this way, then that one love making quote unquote incident that leads to that type of conception, that entity is part of the love making in a sense, is part of the dance. This is why we say it ascends the physical aspect of it. It goes beyond that. There is the understanding of the collective, you could say, over soul expanding with the adoption or embracing of another member in our arms, in our hearts, and other beings that are connected to the ones making love can even tune in on that and celebrate it with them, making it a type of group party, even though the actual lovemaking can be chosen to be kept a private dance in that way. The energetic level of that can be tuned in with by multiple beings at the same time.
All right.
All right.
Yes. Sounds very nice to be a Yahyel.
Oh, thank you.
Uh,
Again, all of this energetically is available to you in one way or another. It may just require certain training of the focus, and then still also not judging where you're at. That's probably the most important part to add to all of what we just shared. As you are in a journey, and where you are at can be experienced about as magically as what we perhaps just shared with you, but it will be custom tailored to the reality that you have chosen to explore and the dimensions that are closer to that. There is always, looping back to the metaphor of the silk sheet of
yes.
fabric, there is always spaces beneath and above each and every fabric that are relevant to the fabric and can be experienced as absolutely mind blowing and very expansive, no matter on what reality you are focused. So, none of what we just shared is meant to show off or give you the feeling that where you are is not at least as, that where you are is not just as important and relevant to all that is as how we experience it, but it may give you something to tune in with, for instance, in your dreams. And that then may allow you to have a non physical experience similar to the one we just described.
Okay, I understand.
All right.